Ngai he ai te nuku api api. Whio roro kau i te kō piripiri. E au re ai i te kō pātanga. Ki te ue nuku ki te ue rangi ki te hanga nei āwai. Ki te hanga atu tātou tūpuna tāne te tokorangi. Ka tuhi ki runga, kararapa ki raro, ka puta ko te whai au ki te ao marama, ti he mauri ora. That was a karakia that extend back into the aeons of time, into the creation stories of te ao Māori. And on that note, can I just say, as we weave that into tonight's kōrero, may that be however you want that to be, through the narratives that we'll hear tonight. Kia ora.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك اللهم لنا فيما أعطيت واصرف عنا برحمتك شر ما قدرت وقضيت إنك تقضي بالحق سبحانك ولا يقضى عليك. اللهم هب لنا قبل الموت توبة وعند الموت شهادة وبعد الموت جنة ونعيمة. اللهم واجعل خير أيامنا يوم نلقاك يا رب العالمين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Thank you.
Kia ora. I'm Professor Mohan Dara. I'm the director of the Center for Culture-Centered Approach to Research and Evaluation, or CARE, at Massey University. It is our pleasure and our honor, really, to partner with the Palestine Solidarity Network, Eutoria, to host Julie amidst us. I will quote, to begin with, one of my favorite thinkers and advocates of social justice when I think about questions of social justice. And I begin, quote, "The arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice," I end quote. Reverend Martin Luther King. One of the things that we have noticed over the past decades is the ability of communication to be used as a tool of propaganda to silence stories, to silence the deployment of militarized violence, and to silence the murder of large numbers of people under the name of particular tropes that often are inverted in the forms of offerings of justice. It is only recently that, with the works of colleagues like Julie on the ground, with the work of journalists, that we have started paying attention to the extensive atrocities in Palestine and the ongoing occupation of Palestinian territories. In the midst of these articulations, though, one of the things that is clear is that the term democracy itself has been turned into a joke. It is often used under the name of peace, under the name of civility, under the name of dialogue, in order to silence and erase. It is within that context, I believe, that it is really important to listen to voices like that of Julie, and more importantly, to pay attention to the voices that we listen to here, mediatized through the screens and through narrative accounts, and that are systematically and deliberately erased from the discursive space. I will invite you, Andy, to provide an invitation and an opening to Julie.
Thank you, Mohan. Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome here tonight. I just want to acknowledge Palmerston North Library for hosting us. Thank you, Jenny and Adrian. Ko Andy Hickman tōku ongoa. I'm a priest in the city and a chaplain at Massey University. Tonight, I get to represent the Palestinian Solidarity Network of Aotearoa, and co-hosting with Professor Mohan and the team at CARE. We're just delighted to have Julie with us. So Julie Webb-Pullman, glad to have you with us. I just want to acknowledge Julie has come here at her own expense and has been willing to come and share with us tonight. I think we're going to be challenged, inspired, confronted, informed. And so that's what will happen tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome you up. Julie, thank you that you're here. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and thank you everybody for coming tonight, and thank you to the Palmerston North Library for hosting, and to Andy and to the professor for co-hosting. While we get the laptop working again, I'll just do a short introduction of myself and how I came to be in Gaza doing this work. I began my studies in philosophy. My first degree was philosophy, followed by a Master of Public Health, and later by a postgraduate certificate in applied law, studying international humanitarian law. And I also have a diploma in investigation. I was working as an investigator of health practitioners for over 5 years in Australia, and then I was investigating human rights abuses in Latin America. So I was based in Cuba for 5 years and doing a lot of work in Honduras, Mexico, Venezuela, Nicaragua, El Salvador, election observing as well as human rights observing. I went to Gaza first in 2010 after the attack on the Mavi Marmara humanitarian aid flotilla that went a Turkish humanitarian organisation called IHH. And that attack resulted in the deaths of 10 people, 9 immediately, and another one who died a few years later from the injuries sustained. As a result of that, New Zealand Public sent 6 people and 3 ambulances from London to Gaza. And we broke the blockade. We got through after about 4 weeks of driving through France, Italy, Greece, Turkey, Syria, and finally through the Rafah crossing to Gaza. In my time in Gaza, I began there basically with that blockade busting exercise, and then as a journalist reporting back. But in 2012, I was present for the first sustained Israeli offensive, which was 8 days long, and which was a very terrifying, very brutal bombardment with no let-up for 8 days. I reported on that, but I didn't do any investigation work then because it was over very quickly, and I just carried on as doing media work. But in 2014, the attacks in 2014, it was clear that it was going to be a very long, drawn-out offensive, and it was going to be very brutal and bloody. And I was working as volunteering for the Ministry of Health, getting out the information on deaths and injuries each day, because very early on, within days, it was obvious that women and children were the main victims. Civilians were the main victims of this Israeli assault. And entire families were being wiped out. There would be an attack on a building that would kill 18 people in one family, because traditionally people build, like parents will build their house on the ground floor, and then as their sons marry, they build on top. So you end up with these tall buildings, maybe 10, 15, sometimes up to 20 apartments, all in one building. So when that building is bombed, it wipes out several generations of one family. And that was happening. And the Director General of Aqsa Hospital asked me to go with him during the first ceasefire, because there'd been many attacks on hospitals and healthcare facilities, and they'd had to shut down all the primary health centres along the border. And I went with him to inspect the damage. And it was the first hospital we went to was Bet Hanoun Hospital in the north, and it had been bombed. There were shells lying in the grounds of the hospital. There was missile fragments everywhere. It was quite clearly a gross breach of the Geneva Conventions. And so I said to him, is anybody collecting this evidence? And he said, oh, because he just thought I was a journalist, what do you know about evidence? And I said, well, I used to be an investigator, and I know that we should be collecting this evidence, because to attack a hospital is a war crime. It's a breach of the Geneva Conventions, and a war crime is any grave breach of the Geneva Conventions. So attacking a hospital, which is in use as a hospital, it had people, there were people in the emergency department that were injured. So this is clearly a war crime. So he then put me with a committee, and we spent the rest of the 50-day offensive. Every time there was a ceasefire, we would go out and collect the missile fragments, collect statements from people, interview the people that were present at the time, and get their contemporaneous testimony about what happened. The other thing that happened was that as these hospitals were coming under fire, the Director General of Wafa Rehabilitation Hospital, which at that time was the only rehabilitation hospital in all of Palestine, they had been shot with a missile, and they had sent home as many people as they possibly could as soon as the bombing had started, because they were quite near the border. But there were 14 totally high dependency patients who were completely 24-hour dependent, either comatose, intubated, on oxygen, on drips. They had to have 24-hour medical care. So they couldn't be sent home. There was nobody to care for them. So he asked if I could organise some people to come and be at the hospital, to maintain a presence at the hospital, internationals, so that to deter the Israelis from bombing it, because the Israelis said they were going to destroy that hospital. So I found about 10 people from France, Sweden, Venezuela, Spain, the United States, England, and me from New Zealand. And we had shifts. We took shifts of 12 hours, 2 people every 12 hours. So we maintained a presence at that hospital. Very early on, everyone had to be shifted because of the 3rd floor had been bombed, so the people that were left had been all moved down to the ground floor. But then they kept on bombing, and so everybody ended up actually just in the corridors of the ground floor, because we couldn't even be in the rooms on the sides because missiles were falling right next to them, the windows would break. We had to move to the internal part of the building. And after a few days, only a few days, the Israelis decided to just bomb it, and they rang up and said, we're going to destroy the hospital, get out. And the 2 people who happened to be on duty, a Spanish man and a Venezuelan woman, rang the International Red Cross, the Red Crescent, the Ministry of Health, calling for ambulances to come and evacuate these 14 people and the remaining medical staff. And they said, we can't come, it's too dangerous. There was just bombing happening every 30 seconds, missiles. They had drones, they had aircraft bombing, and they also had tanks coming through the streets and firing artillery. So it was extremely dangerous, and no ambulances would go there. So these 2 people with no medical experience whatsoever had to pull out all the tubes, all the drips, all the IVs, and they got a van that was at the hospital that was not an ambulance, but they had the keys, and they just put the people on the floor of the van and drove them through the streets, through the bombing, through the people fleeing the bombs, and got them out. It took them about 5 trips to get everybody out. And miraculously, nobody was killed. Everybody survived that evacuation, but they did get hit. The Venezuelan woman was injured in the arm by shrapnel, and the vehicle was hit, but they all physically, they all lived. So, and by the next morning, that Wafa hospital was completely destroyed. So, and the Israelis said, right, and now we're going to attack Shifa Hospital, because Hamas is hiding in the basement. And this was nonsense. Hamas the leaders were not hiding in the basement, but Israel was determined to scare everybody and to threaten. So we then shifted our attention to trying to protect Shifa Hospital. So we took up our shifts at the Shifa Hospital, and we were going into a different ward each time to make sure that, because they say we're going to bomb the surgical department, so we'd go to the surgical department. But we had to try and keep people in as many different places as possible, because we never knew whether they might say the surgical department but bomb the maternity department. You just didn't know. And while we were doing this, Shifa Hospital was the biggest hospital in Gaza. It's the tertiary hospital. It does all of the main surgery, main procedures. So further south is a hospital called Aqsa Hospital in middle Gaza, and it serves about 300,000 people, and it was quite a way away from the border. It was closer to the sea, and there was very little resistance activity in that area. Most of the activity was happening along the border. So nobody really thought about Aqsa Hospital. They didn't feel that they were going to be bombed. After all, they're a hospital and they're not anywhere near any of the military attacks. So they thought they were safe. So now I'm going to show you what happened 4 days after Wafa Hospital was completely destroyed. While everyone was protecting Shifa Hospital, this is what happened to Aqsa Hospital.
ستحملك الفراشات إلى ظهر غيمة ستجري بك الغزال.
احنا كنا في الدار والحين قصفوا جامنا 12 دار. الحين كل طلعنا برا لقينا جامنا القصف. احنا شفنا ناس قاعدة تجري جرينا معاها ووصلنا المستشفى.
سكان المنطقة كلهم فروا هلع وخرجوا إلى المدارس، وفي منهم ناس لجأوا إلى المستشفى، وكانت بتشهد المنطقة القسم الجديد للولادة كان مليء بالناس، يعني كانوا على الأرض كلياتهم فرشين حصر وكذا وقاعدين على الأرض كلياتهم بالشمس وفي العراء.
أول ما ندخل المستشفى ولا هم قصفوا إسعاف، دخلنا جوا المستشفى صاروا يقصفوا المستشفى قدايم.
فقمنا فورا أنا وزملائي، كان رجاء العطار وأكرم سعيد قمت بتحريك سيارة الإسعاف، ركبت سيارة الإسعاف واتجهت إلى المصابين داخل مستشفى شهداء الأقصى في حرم المستشفى. وقبل نزولي المستشفى يعني بدي أنزل، فتحت باب سيارة الإسعاف لأنزل، تم ضربنا قذيفة على سيارة الإسعاف، فصوبت أنا وزميلي رجاء العطار وأكرم سعيد.
لسه نزلنا من الإسعاف ويعني نزلناه ولسه دخلنا المستشفى صار القصف. ساعتها كان المشهد مش طبيعي، لأنه أنا كنت لسه بنزله، صار القصف وصار شظايا تتناطر في كل مكان، وصارت الإصابات تيجي من الداخل ومن الخارج، وإسعافات تيجي من برا، وناس داخل المستشفى تصاوبت. فأنا من كتر المشهد ما كان صعب نزلته وسبته وروحت.
له مجيء ابن أخي الذي استشهد على عبد المجيد عبد القادر أبو دحروج. لو بقولنا ما انتم مالكم خايفين ايش في عينا فيش شيء، انا امان المستشفى لسه ما وفى كلمته الا هو خبط فوقينا بالضبط فوق المكان اللي احنا واقفينه. ما شفت الا خضر وسود دخل ضربنا من فوق من عارفك الهمني، رميت حالي ونهيك، رميت حالي تحت الطاير تاع المستشفى، صارت قوم حجار ونزل جنبي، هو كان بيني وبينه متر. فوقتها كان معي شنطه رميتها، بتجيب ناخذ الشنطه لقيت ابن اخويا دمه كله بنزين قدامه من ظهره وراسه كله، ما قدرش فتت اجري على المستشفى، قلت لهم الحقوا في شارع في واحد استشهد روحوا شوفوه.
الحين كنت عند امي، ولا هم صاروا يقصفوا يمرقوا ناس من عندنا مصابين ولا 2 صاروا محروقين وجههم وامي غطتنا عليه وجه عليهم. انا صرت اعيط واقول عند امي، ما شفت الموت في عيني عشان هيك قلت.
فاحنا خلينا المرضى الزوار المرافقين كليتهم قاعدوا في الطابق الارضي. الطابق الارضي على ما يبدو كمان ضرب، قصف بضربه، هربوا لوين؟ الى قسم الاستقبال والطوارئ. الان قسم الاستقبال والطوارئ تقريبا في ما بين 50 الى 70 اصابه مع 4 شهداء.
وانا على باب المختبر بالضبط اجتني شظيتين في ايدي وفي رجلي. كان المختبر الحين انشلت حركته حتى المصابين. يعني انا عيطت، انا بحكي مع زميلاتي انا مش قادره اروح احضر دم لمصاب. يعني هاي الامر اللي بحزنني كثير، انه ناس محتاجه عنايه واحنا مش قادرين لا قادرين نعمل حتى تشوفي دمهم.
الفيرينج او الخوف هذا هو شيء من يعني شيء من اساسه في داخله. ففي كثير من الممرضات والممرضين اول ما خرجوا نزلوا يجروا واصيبوا بالهلع وخرجوا الى اسفل. انا يعني عن نفسي ما بقول إن يمكن انا نفسي جيت بدي اخرج تذكرت المرضى مين بده يطلعهم وين بدهم يروحوا. فعدت انا كرئيسة قسم بتحمل المسؤولية بغض النظر عن مين اللي نزل او ما نزلش. اول شيء قبلته في وجهي هو كان شاب مصاب، كان مرافق لمريض اخوه مصاب وكان نايم عنده.
فنظرت للغرفة اني اشوف هل انا بقى اشوف حاجة هل في، فوجدت عديل قد قطع رأسه. المنطقة هذه من شوية لقيت مخه واقع على الأرض وجسمه وراسه من المنطقة هذه ليس له رأس. وجدت كمان أحد المرضى السرير مقلوب عليه ومرمي تحت.
بديت أفكر في المرضى بدي أخليهم. أنا طلعت رحت لفيت في الغرف كلياتها، كل مريض ما أخلاش أخليته. اللي كان بيقدر يمشي على رجليه طلعته على رجليه، اللي مش قادر يمشي على رجليه حطيته على كراسي، جبت كراسي ويلي تشيرز وكلهم نزلتهم كراسي متحركة. بديت أنزل فيهم واحد واحد.
هو دخل غرفة العمليات وأثناء الشغل بعد ما تبنج على طول خبطوا المستشفى، فتصاب هو إصابة في راسه، فانخبطت المستشفى. نزل الطاقم ضل حاله. بعد ساعة تقريبا طلعنا على المستشفى فوق إحنا، فلقينا انه هو واقع على السرير ورجليه مقطوعه الاثنين وهو مبنج ولحاله. فشلناه وحطيناه في الاسعاف.
بدات اخلي المرضى، خليت المرضى تقريبا اللي ضلوا اخر حاجه اللي هم المرضى اللي على الاسره، هم اخر شيء. نزلناهم، بلشنا ننزل فيهم. انا قلت لهم مش حنقدر ننزلهم ونقدر نخلي كل هذا والقصف فوقينا. يعني الشظايا كانت تتناثر حوالينا. كنا يعني الشيء الوحيد اللي نعمله لما تكون قذيفة تضرب المستشفى وتدخل علينا الشظايا ان احنا ننزل على الارض فقط ونرجع نمارس عملنا، انا و3 زملاء لي تقريبا ودكتور، وفي ناس من المرافقين طبعا تشجعوا واجونا وكانوا بيشيلوا معنا المرضى. خليتهم يشيلوا المرضى بالشراشف اللي ما بيقدرش ننزل على اساس نسهل في عملية الاخلاء. انا عندي خشونة في ركبتي، اعتقد انه يوميها يمكن ما كنت بتعب لو طلعت الدرج. طلعت يوميها الدرج 8 مرات.
بالاضافه للناس الجمهور المراجعين اللي كانوا موجودين، الناس اللي هاربين من برا، قسم الاستقبال ضيق جدا لدرجه انه احنا صرنا مش عارفين نتحرك. بدينا طبعا نستغيث، نتصل بالصليب الاحمر الدولي.
يعني اخر شيء اني توقعت انه اجانا الصليب الاحمر اخر ناس. طبعا الاعلام اجانا كله، ما ضل الاعلام الا اجا اخر ناس هم اجوا الصليب الاحمر. توقعنا انه احنا خلص انحلت مشكلتنا. اجانا الصليب الاحمر بدل ما يقولنا ان احنا بدنا نخليكم طلعكم من المستشفى، قال لازم تخرجوا كلكم من المستشفى وتعملوا اخلاء لان المستشفى بدها تقصف كلها.
قلنا خلاص اخلوا من هنا بدل المكان هين صار مش امن، روحوا مكان ثاني. رحنا عند الاستقبال اللي هو شفت ابن اخويا مستشهد مرمي واخويا الكبير متصاب ابنه، وبنت اخوي ماسكه اخوها الصغيره وكانت بتعيط، واخويا اللي جاء وحكى كان على سريره وبصرخ له. اجى اخويا قال له خلاص اطلعوا من المكان هذا كله غدروا بدنا نطلع. قلت له وين نروح نطلع؟
جانا تقريبا الصليب الاحمر الدولي بعد يمكن ساعه او ساعه ونص، هم طالعين على الدرج ومعهم المصورين. تم استهداف المستشفى بقذيفة أو صاروخ آخر. الناس سكرت الأبواب وقالوا لهم إحنا مش ممكن نسيبكم إلا غير تعطونا الأمان، يعني إحنا مستشفى.
يعني أصبنا بالهلع بزيادة. طب اخلينا انت خرجنا من المستشفى. قال انا ما بخلق اشخاص احياء.
انه لا مكان امن في قطاع غزه، حتى المستشفيات ليست امنه، حتى سيارات الاسعاف ليست امنه، الاطقم الطبيه ليست امنه. كانت هذه الرساله واضحه ونعرفها جيدا.
فانت هيك شعرت بالاحباط، احباط شديد، انه حتى الصليب الاحمر اللي انت ممكن تقول ممكن يعني يوفر لك الأمان للحظات تخرج فيها وتروح على بيتك، للأسف فقدنا هذا الشعور.
والله أنا يوم قصف المستشفى الصحيح بعتبره يوم زي يوم القيامة. كان يعني كل واحد مشغول في حاله. القصف كان فوق الخيال، فوق الوصف، شيء يعني حتى بتصور اللغة أو اللغات عموما فيش فيها كلمات تعبر عن المشهد اللي أنا شفته. يعني واحد أخوه بيسيبه بشرط، يعني لو حكيتها صعب بالناس تصدقها، لكن هو صار بالفعل انه انا سبته شردت.
بطبيعتي كجراح يعني طول اليوم يعني على مدار الساعة واحنا نتلقى اصابات، وانا كنت متخصص في الاطفال، يعني اصابات الاطفال فقط، لان هذه الحرب تميزت بكثرة عدد اصابات الاطفال. اثر بشديد من الخوف ان نحن طواقم طبية نقدم مهنة طبية انسانية لأطفال فلسطين بأننا غير آمنين في مكان تواجد عملنا، وهذا شيء مرعب.
سواء أطفال، سواء نساء، سواء يعني ناس في أماكن عملها، سواء ناس في دورها، يعني كل ما كانش في أمان خالص في غزة. حتى المستشفيات اللي هي مكان الأمان للكل ما فيش فيها أمان.
ففي طفلة كان مولودة إلها ساعتين أصيبت بشظية صغيرة في على كتفها، هيك يعني يمكن جرح خدش بسيط، لكن يعني طفلة لسه مولودة بتستقبل العالم الجديد، انها تستقبله مفروض بابتسامة، انها اجت على الحياة استقبلته باستهداف.
الناس تلجأ إلى الأمان داخل المستشفى للعلاج، والآن إذا المصاب لا، هذا المستشفى لا يستطيع أن يقدم العلاج الآن.
مستشفى صحية تقدم خدمات يعني صحية فقط، يعني مؤسسة كذلك يعني تخدم 300,000 نسمة بالمحافظة الوسطى، يعني يتم استهدافها أمام مرأة يعني ومسمع العالم العربي والأجنبي والدولي.
مستشفى تنقصف يضل كلام، يبقى البني آدم ما ضلش أصلا أي ريحة محبة في العالم كله هنا، في كل غزة فيش بداية من المستشفى تنقصف يبقى فيش رحمة.
I know it's a very shocking and disturbing video, but that is the reality of what happens in Gaza. And it's also now the reality because people didn't stand up, as the man said, that it happened in front of the eyes of the Western and the Arab and the international communities, and nobody did anything, and that was 2014. Since then we have seen attacks on hospitals exponentially increase in Syria, Yemen, all over the world. It is now fair game. Hospitals are now fair game. Medical staff are fair game. We've also seen it in the Great March of Return in Gaza every week. Thousands of people go along the border to demand the right of return as guaranteed under UN Resolution 194. But of course, they get shot by the Israeli snipers along the border, and many paramedics have been injured. There's been 750 injured, 7 killed, 119 ambulances directly hit by either live fire or tear gas canisters, and there's been 4 health facilities damaged and 1 hospital damaged, just in the march of return since the 30th of March 2018. So in the last 18 months, that's how many health paramedics and others have been killed and injured in Gaza. So what do we do about it? Well, what we do, what I've been doing since 2014 when I started working with that team, I then began working with a human rights organisation and training people to collect evidence to international standards. If we are taking our cases to the International Criminal Court, and Palestine signed the Rome Statute in 2014, and it came into effect on the 1st of April 2015 for events after June 2014. So this offensive fits in that, and all the Great March of Return fatalities and injuries fall under that as well. So we've been collecting evidence, and I've been trying to train as many people as possible so that the evidence we collect is collected according to international standards and is then managed and stored according to international standards, which means things like chain of custody, making sure that when shrapnel, say the shrapnel that was removed from that baby's shoulder, is collected, bagged and tagged, collected by the surgeon, sealed in a container, which is then handed over and bagged and tagged by the authorities and then held securely so it can't be interfered with, it can't be changed, it can't be swapped, nothing can happen. And its integrity is upheld until it reaches the court. When that day is, we don't know, but we're doing our very best to preserve all the evidence according to international standards. We also interview the victims, we interview witnesses, we collect their medical records, because to make a complaint to the International Criminal Court, there has to be some kind of injury or death or damage to a protected place. So we focused our work in 2014 first of all on all of the civilians and civilian targets, because they are the clearest breaches of the Geneva Conventions. But then with the March of Return, of course, because there were 2,500 people killed and many thousand, 10,000 injured, it means a lot of work, and we only had small teams of 4 teams of investigators, 2 people per team, and 1 human rights organisation. So we then trained, for 2 years, trained the people in the emergency departments of the hospitals, because this is where the injured and the dead first present, and it's where you get your evidence before anyone's had a chance to interfere with it or do anything that might make it inadmissible to the court. And we get the fresh information as soon as it's happened, what happened, where it happened, when it happened, all of those details that are so important to the criminal case. So we've trained over 100 people in the various hospitals to do this work. I have also been training other lawyers, policemen, whoever wants to do the training, we try to train. Anyone who is going to be on the ground where a war crime is committed and will be able to learn to collect the evidence such that it will stand up in court, then we train them. It also requires forensic photography, and that's an area that we don't actually have any professional accredited forensic photographer in Gaza. We have professional photographers but not forensic photographers, and so that's an area that we are looking at doing some online training if possible to get some people accredited in that, because The experts can tell a lot from a photograph of a wound. They can tell chemical weapons, even what chemical would have caused that particular type of burn on the skin. They can tell whether it's an entry wound or an exit wound, the trajectory of the projectile, all sorts of information just from a simple photograph, as long as it's a good quality photograph. And even the photographs are subjected to the same type of chain of custody, where they're put onto a permanent recording thing, and they have a hash value. And a hash value, if any alteration is done to a photograph, the hash value changes. So we immediately make 3 copies, and then one is stored completely for the court, and then we might use one for our daily work, and then when it comes to the day in court, it can be proven that the photograph is as it originally was taken, because the hash value will be the same. So there's a lot of that technical training that is going on. At the moment, we would like to write an investigation. I've been working on doing lots of training, so I've kind of been building up a lot of training materials, and so we're now looking at producing a investigator's manual for war crimes investigation, because there's plenty for lawyers, but there's nothing that have been developed from the Rwanda Tribunal and the Yugoslavia Tribunal, but there's nothing for evidence collectors at all. And they tend to use police as evidence collectors. Now, one of our problems in Gaza is that the International Criminal Court investigators cannot get in there. Israel won't let them in through areas, and Egypt won't let them in through the Rafah crossing. So there has been no investigator able to come into Gaza to collect the evidence. So we have to do that work on the ground. With Afghanistan, there was the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court wanted to open an investigation, and the chamber ruled that justice could not be served because they could not get access to the witnesses, because Trump had banned all ICC investigators and the prosecutor for ever getting a visa to enter the United States, so they would not be able to interview the people that they needed to talk to, and nor would they be able to get into Afghanistan. So, but in Gaza we have the situation where we have got the teams on the ground capable of doing the work, and who are doing the work and have been doing the work. So we believe that we have a very good chance of getting a case to the International Criminal Court if evidence is what it's based on, having reliable and good quality evidence, which we believe we have a lot. Okay, so with regards to the prosecutor, the state of the complaint, Palestine's complaint to the International Criminal Court at the moment is it is in preliminary assessment. Now, there's 3 ways that if an investigation can be opened at the International Criminal Court. One is the prosecutor on her own initiative. One is a referral by the state party, and that one is by a referral from the United Nations Security Council. Now, since 2014, we have been providing the prosecutor with plenty of evidence. We've submitted over 2,000 individual victim complaints since 2014. So we believe that even on her own initiative, the prosecutor could open a full investigation. Then in 2018, in May 2018, after the Nakba Day massacre on the Great March of Return, where over 60 people were killed in one day and hundreds injured, the president of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, made a formal referral a state referral to the International Criminal Court. And that's over a year ago, and a year and a half ago. And we're still waiting for the prosecutor to move from a preliminary assessment into a full investigation. And we believe that with the information, the over 2,000 cases that we've provided, along with the many other cases provided by Palestine Centre for Human Rights, Al Mizan Centre, all the many other human rights organisations, Al Hague, who are all also submitting complaints to the ICC, we believe there's overwhelming evidence for the prosecutor to now open a full investigation. And each year for the last 2 years, she said in her annual report she's close to making a decision, but she never makes the decision. So it's, and I went to The Hague in July, and I met with the prosecutor's office and with the victims unit and with the outreach department of the International Criminal Court, and they said, oh, there's a lot of political things, you know, there's lots of other factors other than purely evidence. Now, we know this. I mean, as anybody who's ever had anything to do with Palestinian issues knows, that if it was just a matter of justice and law, we would not be 71 years down the track still have an occupied Palestine. It would have, the occupation would have ended. But it's political. The reason that it hasn't is political, because the international community has not put on the pressure onto Israel to stop the occupation, to end the occupation, to end the illegal siege of Gaza, to end the building of settlements, to end all of the illegal practices that it is committing daily. And that is not because these things are legal, it's because of political. It reminds me of the days before the end of apartheid in South Africa, when everybody knew that apartheid was wrong, but all of those countries kept on dealing with the South African regime, but slowly, over about 30 years, they ended it. But we've got now 71 years in Palestine, and there's still no end in sight. There's UN resolution after UN resolution, but there's no action on those resolutions. And we see how fast they are to slam sanctions on Iraq, slam sanctions on Iran, slam sanctions on everybody except Israel for far less breaches of human rights law and international law. If we just look at this as a matter of international law, which does require us to apply the law without fear or favour, everybody is equal under international law. Palestinians are equal to Israelis. They have equal rights. Under international law, Palestine has the right to self-determination and always has had. The State of Israel was established on an existing Palestinian country. You can see maps going back hundreds of years that have Palestine clearly marked on them. It was not, the Israeli argument reminds me very much of the Australian terra nullius argument of the British, when the British went to Australia and just declared it terra nullius, an empty country. And it was not true then and anymore than it is true that Palestine was an empty country or a desert with nothing on it until Israel arrived. It had been there for thousands of years, and Palestinians were living, there were Christians, there were Muslims, and there were Jews, all living happily together prior to 1948. So this myth of this empty country, that the people who were persecuted by European countries should have the right to go and take Palestinian land and territory, is just that, a myth. You know, there's no right in international law for that. It's called occupation. And it has been called occupation in the UN for many, many years, 70 years. And it still hasn't ended. So the two things that really have to happen is the occupation of Palestine must end, international law must be upheld, and only then can we have the follow-on effects such as these other things like the Geneva Conventions. Because while the Geneva Conventions are suffering grave breaches, so too will all of these other breaches continue. But to bring us back to the video, there are some highlights or high points in there that I would like to share with you, because it's always such a depressing thing to see that the man who was abandoned in the operating theatre with 2 legs blown off and hit in the head, and then taken to an ambulance. What happened to him next is the ambulance he was taken to started to leave, and the ambulance to go to Aqsa Hospital, the ambulance in front of that was blown up in front of their eyes, and all the people in that one were killed. So then they ended up, some civilians took that guy in their car and drove him to Aqsa Hospital, where he was successfully, had both legs, amputated, and he is now works in my internet provider, and when I go to pay my monthly internet bill, he's the man at the reception desk. So from what seemed like the absolute certain death, this man survived. And if anything that we see in Gaza, that is what we see, that people survive. Palestine will survive. It doesn't matter, they would have to kill every single Palestinian on earth to kill Palestine. It will not die. The laboratory assistant who got hit by shrapnel, she's suffered permanent damage, nerve damage in her hands, but she is still working in the laboratory at Aqsa Hospital. She has gone back to work, and she works there still. These people continue. And there's some photographs over there that I've brought, that I've taken, that you can see, like the way in which Gazans in particular and Palestinians in general are always portrayed as terrorists. A lot of those photographs over there, you will see the daily life of Palestinians in Gaza. They are not terrorists. They are mothers, they are sisters, they are brothers, they are young boys feeding a kitten in the street, they are dole sellers, they are all sorts of people just like you and me. And they want to live in peace, just like you and me, in their own land. And that is not too much to ask. So all we ask of everybody is to help them to do that, help them to get justice, and to put pressure on the New Zealand government in particular. New Zealand was a world leader in the anti-apartheid struggle. New Zealand was a world leader in the anti-nuclear struggle. We sent a frigate to the French testing grounds to stop nuclear testing in the Pacific. Why can't we send a frigate with humanitarian aid to Gaza? Why can't we insist? Why can't we keep tabling UN resolution after UN resolution, as we did in 2016, demanding an end of the occupation? Why do we have an Israeli embassy in New Zealand when these war crimes and crimes against humanity are being committed daily? Why, these are the questions, and especially coming into an election year, you should be asking your candidates, what are you going to do about ending Israeli impunity? What are you going to do about ensuring Palestinians get to have the same human rights as everybody else does? So now I'll take any questions from you. I'm probably...
Shall I just facilitate that? Thank you, Julie. I just want to comment that I just want to value the fact that you've had to do a lot of self-compassion, because the emotional intensity and drain of seeing such an injustice must be overwhelming. I mean, it's been overwhelming for us to see that. So I just want to value and just acknowledge your courage and your endurance and your wisdom in having self-compassion, and just appreciate the fact you've been able to share tonight, and that would have meant reopening some of those wounds and that grief. So I just want to acknowledge that. Any questions or comments that we can ask Julie? Any thoughts? Fred?
Could you, I'm trying to get an understanding of the targeting of health professionals, of people seeking hospital assistance, those vulnerable people, when it is well known to the Israelis, there's sites. Why are, and the perhaps the excuse that Hamas are being hidden there, is that the excuse for bombing everywhere? Why are they? Is it to demoralize the population? I can't understand.
I guess only Israel can really answer your question, but yes, it is certainly one of the psychological techniques they use to demoralize the population is to attack hospitals, to attack health workers, now the media as well. They attack many media people to try to deter them from reporting, especially on the March of Return. And yes, it's a method of psychological torture, as are the drones. Living in Gaza, you have drones flying around almost every single day, and sometimes all day, every day, for long periods. And they are just, it's like, you know how annoying it is having a mosquito trapped in your room when you're trying to sleep. Well, imagine that, except multiplied by about 100. The sound of a drone is even worse. So there's the psychological aspect of it, the dehumanizing, but there's also this attempt to demonize Hamas. Now, Hamas was basically a resistance movement that was involved in a lot of humanitarian social welfare work. They had they did a lot of work with charities. They supported poor people, and that is why in 2006, when they first decided for the first time ever to go in the elections, they won the elections because they had so much grassroots support from people for all their humanitarian work. Now, they were as surprised as everybody else when they won, apparently, because they didn't realise the extent of the support, but they just were putting up an alternative to the rampant corruption of the Palestinian Authority, which was very well known in Gaza and is still well known in the West Bank and everywhere else. And so this demonizing of Hamas and attacking every time anyone does anything. It doesn't matter whether it's Hamas, they will bomb Gaza, and that because they say they hold Hamas responsible for whatever happens in Gaza. So if Islamic Jihad sends a rocket, they will attack Hamas. If PFLP sends a rocket, they will attack Hamas. It really doesn't matter. And everyone in Gaza knows this is rubbish, and it's kind of disturbing that so many people on the outside believe it, but it's a measure of just how effective the Israeli propaganda has been and continues to be. But I think there's a change. I think that social media has made a big difference in people getting more information, and that's not all from the mass media that tended to be very much Israeli owned and controlled. So people have more sources of information now, and they get more better information. But then that's shutting down with Facebook closing down all Palestinian, pro-Palestinian Facebook posts, pro-Palestinian pages. There's a Palestinian Information Centre which just had their Facebook page removed a week ago. They're really under attack again. Yeah.
Another question.
Oh, it's just a detail, really. I just wanted to know about if you had some comments about Red Cross, which appeared to be criticised a little in that film. And my second question, if I can fit one in, was just that film was quite powerful, and I'm just wondering about getting it into mainstream media or getting some help from New Zealand filmmakers to perhaps, sharpen it up a bit and make it, it'd be great to have something like that. We've got Al Jazeera, but putting something like that on Māori TV perhaps.
Okay, now the role of the Red Cross, that was not something that we really expected when we were interviewing people. We didn't realise that the Red Cross had been such bad guys as made out in the video. But this was something that did happen throughout the 2014 offensive, that there were many instances where the Red Cross did not perform according to its mandate, and there were discussions between the Red Cross head office and the various organisations in Gaza. But a difficulty with the Red Cross always is the fact that it's under its mandate, it deals confidentially with this government and confidentially with that one, and never discusses the contents of anything that's discussed. So it doesn't matter what people say to the Red Cross, it's never going to go any further, and you can't really hold the Red Cross to account. It's kind of weird the way they avoid any real scrutiny. But at the same time, there are many people in the Red Cross doing a lot of very, very valuable work, and without which daily life in Gaza would not be possible. One of the things that the International Red Cross is organised the visits for families in Gaza to the Gazans who are in Israeli prisons, and they would not be able to visit their families if the Red Cross wasn't helping. So people are kind of reluctant to upset the Red Cross too much, because they're also dependent on them for many health programs. There's a lot of different things that the Red Cross does. So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. But as we can see, the people, and there were other incidents where people were killed because of Red Cross giving instructions and people following them and being killed. And this is, the Red Cross has got human beings in it just like every other organisation. And in this sort of situation, you don't know how you would behave. So you can't really, like as people in the film said, when the nurse who said everybody ran away and left all the patients, and then she suddenly realised, oh, what about the patients, and went back. When something this terrifying happens, you don't know how you will react. And the doctors who fled from the operating theatre and left that guy lying there, unconscious with both his legs blown off. How do you know as a doctor how you are going? You hope that you would do the honourable thing, but you don't know, because it's the most primal fight or flight, freeze, fight or flight response, and you don't know what you are in that spectrum until it happens to you. So we don't really point the finger at the Red Cross in that way, because they were local people mostly working under incredibly tough conditions. And by then, we're 3 weeks into a very brutal assault in which, probably 1,000 people have been killed already, and they're the ones pulling them out of the buildings. Yeah.
So I have to interrupt. Yeah, that's fine. Julie,
and she had a second half about the video.
We've got one more minute.
Yeah. I'll just quickly say that. This is not a for public screening video at this stage. We made this because we had a paper accepted at the Lancet conference in Amman, and we were afraid none of our authors, there were 6 authors, and everybody kept getting refused visas. So we made the video to show instead of having somebody appear. And then the 6th author finally did get permission, and so yeah, it needs a lot of work. We know that. We did that in 2 days, on a laptop in a very crowded office. Yeah, but yeah, it from the effect that it's had around, I think perhaps we could use it. We could re-edit and do a lot better. So any help would be gratefully received.
And I think, Julie, that highlights the fact that to have accurate, unbiased information is crucial. And most of us are so uninformed, and so when we're speaking to our neighbours or colleagues, I think the thing is, none of us have to be experts, but if we have the courage to at least speak up and say, actually, there's another perspective on that. And I think one of the things that holds us back is we feel so ignorant and ill-informed, and so we lack the courage to actually address perceived injustices. But my encouragement to everyone and to myself is learn what we can, and even if it's a small thing, we as people at the grassroots, we can address the false conceptions and the false narratives. So we have to finish now. There's another group coming. Any final words you want to comment
yes,
on?
well, we are trying to raise funds to employ 2 new investigators for our team, because we've had we've had to put aside the 2014 work with the March of Return, and we've got over 1,000 backlog in the March of Return, so we desperately need some more people. So I have a I don't know. This is somebody's
the bank account
thing.
details.
But there's bank account details, which I'll get up on the screen, and then you can just write them down. The other thing is there's some photographs over there that if anybody wanted to buy any, $5 each, that would go towards, to donations towards that as well. But we are raising funds, and we've had quite a good response around the country. We don't yet have enough even for 1 investigator. We were hoping to get 2, but I'll just put.
So those details are also on the CARE Facebook event page, as well as the Palestine Solidarity Network Association, Aotearoa Association page as well. We've got tea and coffee. Let's make the most of the opportunity to connect. If you haven't met other people here, do so. Have a chat with Julie, and we do have to be finished by 1:45, so if we could just respect that, must be getting close to that. Grab a photo, make a donation. You got cash, whatever, or do an IOU. That would be a great way of supporting.